Shall we start?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the fourth session of the CAMP IDEX Mediation webinar. I'm truly delighted to host today's session, Building a Social Muscle and Finding Common Ground. And it's a very well-timed session considering the extreme polarization that we are seeing everywhere. You know, although it seems that the voice of win, lose, and good, bad is the only voice that we hear, there is another voice that is gaining ground, another voice that is getting louder, although soft right now. The voice of collaboration, of win-win, is slowly finding its place. And today we have an extremely eminent and respected panel of experts who truly understand the value of that voice, the value of dialogue and collaboration. And today we're here to discuss the role of these processes in our society and ways to figure out how we can encourage this becoming a part of our social culture. So without further ado, allow me to introduce this amazing panel that we have. We have Justice Kurian Joseph, who actually needs no introduction to our audience. He's a retired judge of the Supreme Court and has always been an active proponent of collaboration, of resolution, of mediation. While on the bench, he actively referred cases and urged his parties to resolve their disputes and mediate. Since retirement in 2019, Justice Kurian Joseph is actively mediating. And in fact, when we chatted a few days ago, he said that he probably mediates more than he arbitrates, which truly is revolutionary for a retired Supreme Court judge. So thank you, Justice Kurian Joseph, for being part of our panel today.
Thank you.
We have Ms. Rohini Nilekani, again, a very eminent woman who needs no introduction. And this idea of collaboration has been one of her commitments for many years now. I don't know if our audience knows, but she hosted a TV series in 2008 that brought together leaders from the corporate and social sector, for example, Anand Mahindra and Medha Patkar, who have very, very conflicting and diverging viewpoints on land rights, for example, to engage in a facilitated dialogue. Her philanthropy now supports the Uncommon Ground project, again, a pioneering and ambitious project that seeks to build that social muscle that will enhance our societal understanding of these processes and change our response mechanism when it comes to disagreement, to collaboration, as opposed to the adversarial. So thank you so much, Rohini, for being part of this panel. And finally, we have Mr. Sriram Panchu, as I love to introduce him as the godfather of mediation in our country. We were discussing whether it should be godfather or grandfather. We chose godfather. And of course, he's mediated thousands of cases, innumerable disputes. We all know the role that he played in the Ayodhya mediation. And in this conversation, we look forward to hearing his perspective on the role of collaboration in intractable public disputes. After mediating the Ayodhya dispute, Mr. Panchu has set up the Center for Moderating Dialogue, an organization that seeks to support and encourage the community to engage in these responses when it comes to managing public disputes. Such an important initiative, Mr. Panchu, and thank you for being with us to share your thoughts on this subject. Finally, our moderator is the lovely Krishna, who leads the Uncommon Ground project, the project that's supported by the Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies and CAMP. Krishna is perfectly suited to build that social muscle in our society through this project. She is a lawyer by training, a business school professor by experience, an author of mythological and fantasy fiction by reputation. Her latest book has just been released, and now a change maker by passion. So what a wonderful moderator we have to moderate this session. Over to you, Krishna. Looking forward to this hour all together.
Thank you so much, Tara. Once again, namaste and a warm welcome to our eminent panelists and to the attendees who have joined us. We hope you have a wonderful evening. I'm sure, like me, you are also really with such an eminent panel, you must just be waiting to hear their thoughts, their fascinating experiences on this topic. So let's jump right into it. And if I may, I'd like to begin a little close to home with to get the ball rolling by posing my first question to Ms. Nilekani. As we saw in the introduction, Tara did mention about your TV show, The Uncommon Ground, that was started in 2008. I know that there was a book then that followed based on those experiences. It was published by Penguin. And since then, this has been an idea close to your heart. And you are now working, RNP and CAMP are now co-curating this project and trying to give it a different form. And I'm actually very delighted to be a small part of it. But what I really would also love to hear from you, and I'm sure our audience also wants to know, is what drives you to embark on these projects? Why is this idea important to you? Why is it something you feel so strongly about, please?
Yeah. First of all, thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with Justice Joseph and you, of course, Krishna, and Sriram, you. Thank you very much. For a long time, I've been very lucky because my life I've been able to, as being an active member of civil society, then as a philanthropist, but also because of my husband Nandan's life, to be able to have a ringside seat to both the corporate sector and the government sector. I was able to see that at the core of it, all the three sectors seem to have sort of similar societal goals. But there was a lot of friction between them at many points because the approaches were different. And especially when it came to civil society and the bazaar sector, the Samaj and the bazaar sector, I felt that perhaps there had, because whether I went to, whether I read about the World Social Forum or the World Economic Forum, eventually people were talking about how on earth can humanity live together and be sustainable and equitable. But still, there were many different paths to those goals, and there were not enough conversations happening across the divides, which is what led me to my book and my show and my book. And then I felt, because I got a good positive response, and all the people I talked to were more than happy to have that dialogue. It's just that nobody had actually made the dialogue happen. So I saw a great need for intermediary organizations to come together, to be like platforms, to create much more civil discourse in public. And then, of course, in recent years with social media and with political polarization, the need seems to be running even deeper. And that's what led me to set up a philanthropic portfolio around the idea of uncommon ground, which is, can we have safe shared spaces to talk through our differences? That's the short answer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's fascinating to see how this carries such, and I was actually looking at both Justice Joseph and Mr. Panchu, who were nodding in agreement with what you were saying. And clearly this is a topic that means strongly to everyone on this panel. And therefore, I'd like to begin on a slightly personal note and request both Mr. Panchu and Justice Joseph, could you maybe start by sharing one anecdote from your experiences with mediation that actually left you believing that this is something bigger, something very important? Justice Joseph, may I request you to?
Thank you, Krishna. If you ask me one anecdote, it is very difficult. Because every experience has been unique. But generally, I have seen, be it in corporate sector, be it in trade dispute sector, be it in family disputes, where of course there are a lot of settlements or mediation taking place. In any situation, I remember. I'll tell you my first experience since I'm just thinking about it. When this HIV issue started, it was so scary. People and the students were not allowed to sit in the classroom, etc. So they were not even permitted to write examination. So the first case that came before me when I was a judge in the High Court. I have my experience in my public life. I came from public life to lawyer, from lawyer to judge. That made a lot of difference according to me. And all those judges who have come from public, all those people who have come from public life, who have made themselves to the bench, definitely made a mark. And I really am proud of it. That's a different aspect. Well, what I did was, I asked the district collector, Kannur, to call a conference for the people around, and just to touch those students by yourself, just to keep them close. Because at that time, the people with HIV, people are not even going like this corona only, not even going near to them, going etc. The parents were not sending the children to the classes also. So this district collector called a conference in the conference hall of the collectorate, held those children close and hugged them, and had a public concert. So this alleviated a lot of fear from the minds of the people. That is one thing which I remember. That is one of my first experiences. How this sort of a dialogue. Since Rohini said about dialogue, that dialogue, we have a lot of discussion, but never a fruitful dialogue. So a dialogue and a sort of a mediation to alleviate a lot of distrust, a lot of wrong notions, a lot of misunderstanding, and to take society forward in a peaceful manner. This is maybe the one experience I want to share, but I've seen as a judge in court thereafter, tears of joy rolling down literally in my court, literally. Several instances, be it in Kerala High Court, be it in Himachal Pradesh High Court, where the Chief Justice, though I did not have the language fluency of Hindi, but I had the language of heart. No, I remember a case where all the judges had failed. They said, sir, there's no point in wasting time in this case. But I called them. I spoke in my language of my heart. And, again, that was the big story there. It was a big news also there, It was so happily settled, simply mediated, and just called them, what is the difference actually? Just ironing out, understanding what the problem is. Nobody was trying to understand the problem. Everybody was advising them. Mediation, I don't think, is a role of advisor. Mediation is just to understand what the problem is. So I just analyzed, understood, and helped them to evolve solutions. That was a wonderful case. It was reported in the media also. And in Supreme Court, yes. Let me just conclude by citing one example, one situation. A lady coming from a very reputed family. It was a fight among the three brothers. And when I helped them to talk to each other, they were saying, she was saying, sir, after 22 years, I am speaking to my brother. 22 years. And, and she said, today I can sleep because, I don't have to go to a court tomorrow because every day my duty, my job was to pack dress for my husband to this court today. This court in the international, it says international issues also. To some other country, this court, that court, a flurry of litigations. The moment we call the brothers, I thought, why don't we stop it for some time? Let's breathe, and then take a deep breath. Give a stop of all litigations. Take a deep breath. Everybody agrees. They agreed. They said that they will not pursue. This lady, the eldest daughter-in-law of that family, she said, and she was literally crying, and it made many eyes wet in the court. I remember. They told me, today I can sleep because after 22 years, I have spoken in the court at least. And, I can sleep because tomorrow I don't have to go. So there are several. I'm sure Sriram Panchu would have many more such experiences. I can give the whole day remembering these sort of situations which I passed through. Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you so much, sir. That was like so inspiring, and again, motivates the kind of work that we are trying to do. And here's to more inspiration, Mr. Panchu, please.
Well, Krishna, this is a tough one, because every mediation is special, and I'm sure every party out there whose case the mediator are thinking, is he going to mention mine? So this is a tough one. The two stand out to me. A case of Standard Motors, which was wound up, where after a 12-year delay in court where nothing moved, we got a settlement in 3 months. And that settlement benefited the families of 2,196 workers. It is one of the first big successes in mediation. And that is what got President Kalam to the Madras High Court. You see that photograph at the back? President heard about this, and the president's office sent word to the Madras High Court saying the president has heard about this mediation center. His father was a mediator in their village, and he would like to come and visit the center on his next visit to Madras. So that's one case I remember. But the one that really is a standout in my mind is the first case of success in our mediation center. We started it in 2005 in the Madras High Court. Justice Kaju was Chief Justice. He'd given us 2 rooms. And there was a lot of, what is this mediation all about? There's nothing to it. It's just Sriram's, some kind of silly idea he has. So even quite a few people were kind of, there's nothing in this. We all mediate, we lawyers, So anyway, they gave me 2 rooms, and we trained mediators. We started doing cases, and we didn't get our first success. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no success. And then take this next case, a case of a contractor who built a house for an owner, and there were dues we paid, there were disputes, and the case was sent to mediation. About 3-4 sessions, they came to an agreement. The owner wrote out a check, they signed the agreement, the owner wrote out a check, gave it to the contractor. As soon as that happened, the contractor's wife took me aside and said, "Sir, I have to tell you something." She used to come with him for these sessions. And she said, "Sir, my husband has a very threatening illness. I won't mention it. We desperately needed his money for his treatment. We couldn't afford to say it. It will weaken our negotiation stand. Now I can tell you, the money has come. We're greatly relieved. It will be used for his treatment." And when she left that room, she turned back. I never forget this. She turned back and said, "Sir, this is no ordinary room. It is a house of God." And mind you, just at that point, I knew that there is no way mediation is not going to work in India. That there is no way it's not going to work. Sorry for a double negative, but I just knew that this is going to work. It's one of those God affirmatory moments, that the heaven gives you to say, "Look, you're absolutely the right path, just proceed." So that I will never forget that. I will never forget that lady. Years later, driving down a busy street, a busy road in Madras, a couple on a scooter stopped me, and I got out of the car and they said, "You don't recognize us, sir, but we are the couple from that mediation years back, and he's got treated and he's cured and we are well and happy." So, and it's not just me. Every mediator will tell you special stories of theirs. There are hundreds and thousands of these cases floating around in this country. Every mediator has got their special stories of people they helped, because we are in this business. We are in this business of helping. For those of us who do it professionally, it is, a professional activity, which brings in an income. But compared to the value you get of, just doing good, that your work is doing good, making people's lives better, that's a huge thing.
Thank you for that. And this is, I think it's so interesting because it is clear that the role of mediation in dealing with disputes that are already somewhere in the judicial process is, there. Actually, Justice Joseph, I would like to pose this next question to you, please, where I would like to have your thoughts on how, if as a society, we develop a strong collaborative culture where we have space for dialogue, where we have space for these discussions, what do you think would be the impact of something like that on the justice delivery system?
Yeah, so what is the purpose of justice delivery system? Ultimately, it is resolution of disputes and settlement of grievances. So if we can create an atmosphere, at least, between the lawyers, I always tell the lawyers, why do you fight in the court? Whom are you going to win over by fighting between yourself? So you don't get a peaceful atmosphere. So I used to tell the lawyers also. But coming to the question as you asked, so if people have faith in justice delivery system, and if you can create an atmosphere where, ultimately the system itself can come to their help, it's also the mediation outside court is also a facilitating process for the justice delivery system to, to take on. There's no doubt about it. But I tell you the Indian psyche. See, what was our condition before all these constitution and constitutional courts came to our aid? We will say justice in accordance with law. This was justice in accordance with law was our culture also. Originally, look at the interior system, the village head calls for people, and hears both sides and helping them to bring about peace. So I understand there was a more peaceful society. There was a more understanding society, and there was better dialogue between the parties. There was hardly any communal problems also. There was any intercommunity disputes also in those times, because people facilitated dialogue. There were people to guide them. There were people to bridge the misunderstanding between them. Whereas, in a court, what do you do? Court, they take a very conventional or orthodox role, they say. I know many of the judges who sat with me, be it in Supreme Court or High Court, they used to tell me, sir, your role, this is not your role. This is not your role. There was a couple of judges in other courts who used to say, oh, these things you can go and tell in that court. That court means where I sat as a judge. So these are things which you should tell that court. My court is for the deciding law. No, as Sriram said, it's not a question of deciding law. What is the purpose of law? The whole purpose of law is to create order in society and to prevent disorder in society. So if we can create an atmosphere otherwise than deciding a question of law, and if we can create order in society and prevent this disorder in society by resolving the disputes and finding a solution for the grievances, what more is the whole idea of justice? Idea of law and idea of justice, you must differentiate. This is the idea of justice, and this is for this the courts have been set up.
Thank you, sir. That distinction is quite illuminating. And, in fact, some of the things you were saying, it reminded me, Ms. Nilekani, of one of our very first conversations when we talked about how, this style of conflict resolution, of mediation has always been part of our culture. And now we need to be able to reclaim that and work with the existing justice system to be able to put that into action. And I would actually, I'd like to take this conversation forward in those directions where we talk a little bit more about how this can play a role in social and public disputes. But before that, if you'll permit me, I would just like to get our audience a little bit involved. Audience, could we please have the audience poll up? Audience, you'll be, yes, please to answer as you think. And we should have the result in a minute or less. I'm so sorry for some reason. Do we have the results, please, of the audience poll?
Yes, Krishna, are you being able to see them?
No, I can't see the results. Sorry.
1 second. How about
yes,
now?
There we have it. Yes. I'm not sure if everyone can see this, so I just want to take a moment to read it out, please. The question we had put forward to the audience was that mediation would be more effective to resolve, their options were public disputes and commercial disputes. And 73% of our participants believe that mediation is more effective to resolve public disputes. Commercial disputes, which is actually a very interesting finding as I move into my next question, because Mr. Panchu, I would like you to please reflect or share on your experience in mediating one of the most sensitive public disputes in our recent history. And along with that, your thoughts on this, the role of mediation when it comes to these public or social disputes.
I'll do that, but let me just take a minute to go to your earlier question to Justice Joseph. I think that the great improvement we've made over the last 15 years is that we have carved out a place for harmony within the legal system, within the legal landscape. Within the formal legal landscape of this country, we've created and carved out a place for harmony. You know, there is that wonderful expression from the Bible, my father's house has many mansions. You know, and if you think of the legal system, you know, the justice system as a house, earlier on it used to be only adversarial courtrooms. But now in every court, virtually, we have a mediation center as well, where judges routinely and regularly refer cases. You know, so where a completely different kind of resolution is being practiced, and it's harmonious. It's trained lawyers who administer those cases and mediate those cases. It's the judges who advise parties to go to mediation. And it's the court which monitors those cases. So India's legal system has beautifully intertwined mediation and litigation. And people elsewhere are struck by the fact how much we've advanced, both in numbers, where we have thousands of mediators mediating lakhs of cases, and in terms of the sheer concept itself, how it's taken root here. That's one thing. The second thing, yes, you spoke about Ayodhya. Ayodhya is a remarkable example of a court getting into a public dispute. You know, in days before, you perhaps had politicians who knew how to reach across divides and to sort out issues, to sort out differences. Today, unfortunately, you have politicians who, the nature of politics is such that politicians thrive on divides. And therefore, there is a huge vacuum out there in the institutional space of those who are going to push for creating common ground. And I think there is where there is a fantastic role for the courts. Because when a dispute goes to the court is in a great position to, you know, to initiate mediation, to administer it, to monitor it, and to oversee. The court cannot mandate that people should come to an agreement in a public dispute in any mediation, let alone a public dispute. But a court can certainly, you know, facilitate the process by appointing good mediators, trusted mediators whom all parties trust, providing the aura of confidentiality, the protection of confidentiality of the mediator. That's very, very important, especially in a public dispute. You can't have a mediation where, you know, the press can report every evening saying this is what happened, you know, in the mediation room. It'll go ballistic the first day, especially given some of our press anchors. It'll go ballistic and out of the window. But the court, when it mandates confidentiality, everybody respects it. And Ayodhya was a perfect example of that. Such a highly contentious, I mean, Ayodhya is, I mean, to me, it's a God-given opportunity to be part of that, you know. Where will one get a, you know, chance to do something like that? Ayodhya, the dispute between Hindus and Muslims of such a wide, implications. We've lost so many lives because of this. It cross-spans history, politics, law, you know, mythology, current, you know, communal living, intersection between past, present, and future. Ayodhya is massive. And the fact that the court, I think it's a tremendous a testament to judicial wisdom and leadership, statesmanship, I would say, that the court directed mediation Ayodhya. Because to whatever extent the mediation helped in the final resolution, one thing it certainly did. It brought both communities and large sections in both communities around to the fact that we need a resolution around this, that this needs to be resolved. And this can't be the central thing between Hindus and Muslims in India. You know, there are other things out there which are far more important. And this is something which has to be got out of the way. And this was something which came through. And when you talk to people, I can't tell you what happened in the sessions. That's out, I can't, you know, there's confidentiality there. But one thing I can say that I know Ayodhya is from my interaction during the mediation and from readings before that and spanning, virtually the time from the 50s to now. One thing is very sure that, much more than 80-20, I think the very, very overwhelming majority of people wanted resolution. And they wanted a resolution which would benefit, benefit both communities, and they wanted a never again repetition of this. And I think that speaks volumes for the social fabric of this country. We allowed ourselves to get into a mess in Ayodhya. But the fact that people said, please get us out of this mess, somehow get us out of this mess, and never again allow us to fall into this, is, I think, a tremendous message for us to hear as mediators across the board. So I think the courts, yes, I wish I could say more. There's so much. I mean, I could talk for hours about Ayodhya. So the people I've met, the interactions one had, and it's not just, and every segment, every group, there is something so nice, so fine that comes out from within them. Sometimes they have to take public stands, but in private, they'll tell you, I would really like something different. This may be difficult for us to take the stand in public, but, really we would like to see something like this. Yeah, this is one piece of writing which I don't know whether I'll ever be able to do, but it will stay with me, of course, for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thank you. I think your experiences make it very clear that mediation does have a strong and very, very precious, positive role to play when it is applied to the arena of public disputes. But I want to see it, take this conversation in the direction where I want to see if we can expand that scope a little bit more. And Ms. Nilekani, I'd like to come to you with this question, please. That, yes, it's one thing to talk about a semi or quasi-judicial process, which is now being expanded into a public social domain. But a lot of your work, and I've very often heard you speak of a societal muscle, a change of social attitudes towards conflict. And what I hear you talking about there is that our perceptions of how, whether it's as groups or individuals, society needs to relook the way we view divisions, disputes, differences. And could you tell us more about that and what role you see mediation playing in something like that, please?
Yeah, so it's become very clear, right? Even in every home today, there's so much political polarization. It's almost hard to have conversations in the family, and certainly it happens with us also in the extended family, that we've forgotten how to talk to each other without taking a stake, like a staked position and saying, I think like this, therefore I must be right and you must be wrong, right? And if that culture spreads through society, I don't think it's good for any society. So how do we, and that's some of the work, Krishna, we are all trying to do together, is how do we almost build a curriculum for this century, right? Because we all know very clearly, we don't know how to get there, but we all know clearly that we have to reduce the friction to collaborate. We have to reduce the divides between us, because the kind of problems that we're facing, as we are facing right now with the pandemic, is that they're very global problems and they affect us all intensely personally. And the way out seems to be cooperation, and we're losing the art of doing cooperation, right? So building a societal muscle to sort of, as I said earlier, talk across divides, understand the source of the conflict, right? Be able to put yourself in the other side's shoes. If that could become a new public culture, for which almost a curriculum has to be designed, which young people have to be exposed to, with projects on hand to practice that muscle with, right? That's the kind of work that we are hoping to unleash in the next few months and years. So that's what we mean by societal muscle. But I did want to bring in a slightly cautionary note in that, see, when we talk of panchayats, I mean, I don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that the earlier times were idealistic, because there are many power imbalances in society. And whether it's panchayats or khap panchayats, sometimes in a patriarchal setup, mediation or coming to a decision can be at the cost of one section of society, right? That's why the laws, the constitutional framework where everybody has equal rights. We have to bring that perspective also if we are going to do conflict resolution before it reaches the courts. At the end of it, we want a society which is less litigious, and yet at the table at which the dialogue happens must be a somewhat round table and not a square one with sharp edges, and a table where some people get really left out. So while we are talking about this, I do want to say that when we do the curriculum design, when we're talking about building a societal muscle, it also, as a first step, requires us to accept that we are all equal and that this whole goal is not that one side wins, right? But something happens, whereas Sriram was saying, the passion for everybody to reduce conflict gets reflected by nobody losing really badly, right? And that's the delicate art of it, which I'm sure Sriram and Justice Joseph are very much used to. So I did want to bring that in a bit before we moved on. But yes, the goal is to reduce conflict, prevent conflict. One of the successful ways we saw was when we supported the Water Conflicts Resolution Forum. They did a lot of work in the Kaveri Basin with the farmers between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. They worked in the Kerala water basins, Orissa, and they made several strides where the kind of vicious politics that came in was set aside for a moment. And people were able to talk to each other and say, oh, yes, of course we can share water. At least for some time that was possible. And we have to just broaden those opportunities across society in a very structured manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nilekani. I mean, speaking of opportunities, this was, coming back to you, Mr. Panchu, this is something I wanted to ask you.
Krishna, may I interrupt you?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask the other two, my co-panelists. We talked of public and commercial, but since, Justice Joseph, correct me if I'm wrong, since most of the conflicts in courts are between government, how do you create an atmosphere of mediation, arbitration, dialogue, discourse, and prevention of conflict between state departments? I'd love to hear a quick answer. Sorry to interrupt you, Krishna.
Please, it's a fascinating question, and I'm waiting to hear the answer too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rohini. You asked a very valid question, particularly in Supreme Court and High Court. There are two constitutional courts which say maybe majority or a sizable majority of the cases are between the state and the citizen, or between state and the Supreme Court. It is state and state, union and state, etc. A lot of disputes, and the Supreme Court also, they have original suits between in water disputes. All these are constitutionally provided, but actually, as you said, in a vicious politics, you used that expression, vicious politics. Yes, I think Sriram used this word, yes, vicious politics, yes. As it's actually, you take the dispute, you touched on a very, very sensitive water issue. That is actually the existence of a political government between two states. Their political fortunes always, depended on this dispute only, if you think about it. Because I was as additional Attorney General of Kerala. Kerala too was a part of a water dispute because it had a little share in this Kaveri.
Yes.
I could know, how the both states survived on this litigation. It's still going on. There's a tribunal also. People don't want, actually, these politicians do not want these issues to be resolved, whereas people really want. If you listen to Sriram very rightly, so people want a solution. People want a resolution, but politicians do not want it. So therefore, it has been very tough from the government in Supreme Court or in High Court to agree for a mediation. Even after, on environmental issues and, the new concept of a public hearing coming in land acquisition cases also to make people convinced at what's the need of the acquisition and to get the acquisitioning authority be informed as to what are the pangs and pathos of those poor people who are actually to be uprooted from that place, and we cannot be relocated in a different place altogether. So all these concepts are gradually coming to our legislative framework. But how much it goes into the framework of the judges in courts is is a very difficult question for me to answer. They need a lot of sensitization. And if courts take a proactive role, I'm quite sure, many public disputes between governments, state governments and center, business agreements themselves can be very, very amicably resolved, and a lot of time of the court can be used for other purposes, and a lot of energy and money of the state also can be saved.
Okay. Thank you, Justice Joseph. Mr. Panchu, would you like to add your thoughts to on that,
I think
please?
there were lots of, yes, I think there were lots of things that Rohini brought out, which I'd like to, touch upon. I agree with you. One must be very careful about taking mediation just like that to the panchayats. I think there's a fantastic opportunity to train panchayats in mediation, but to also, I think, add on to them, neutral expert mediation facilitators to make sure that the panchayat actually do a proper role of mediation and not revert back to, caste-based lines or, frictional resolution. So I think that point is, well taken. I just want to, Rohini, to kind of put a slightly different perspective, because you said, it is good if we can resolve something, and in the process, not each one shouldn't be too badly off. I look at it differently. I look at all good mediations and settlements as actually not settling for less, but settling for more. Because I think when you expose parties to their true perspective, their larger, their longer the longer interest, the long-term interest, the larger perspective, and the lack of good alternatives to settlement, then they come to realize that we're actually settling in our own self-interest. It's only that this mediator has exposed us to a higher form of our self-interest.
Perfect.
But we're settling in a solid self-interest. The third thing, the point you made about government, and I break this up into two. I think when it comes to government and citizen, the problem is that no government officer, however much he or she knows that the stand of the government is useless and not bona fide, can take a decision to give up anything, because tomorrow they'll be subject to one of the three dreaded C's, the CBC or the CVC or the CAG. And all, successful mediation.
If not CBI.
Yeah, exactly. And, and in a mediation, you give up something which is of lesser value to get something which is of more value. But if you're going to be tasked after retirement and a prosecution investigation for having given up something, who will take that stand? Therefore, unless government comes out of the machinery which says that we have, and we suggested that to government, I hope they've considered it now, some kind of a, high-level screening committee headed by a judge of the Supreme Court, and, packed with whoever officer they want, CAG, CBC, retired, anything, anybody, secretaries to government. But when there is a dispute and there is a negotiation, the negotiating officers take this possible settlement to this committee and say, this is a settlement, these are the facts. Now you tell us, do you approve it? Would you want to change, or do you reject it? And the committee can take a decision. But once it is approved by the committee with or without changes, then that should confer immunity to the officers of government. If government were to do just this one thing, you will dramatically find that, they will settle cases across the board if you provide immunity like this. Joseph Saab, on this point of, fights between government and government born out of political pressure, to benefit from divide, I completely agree with you. Couldn't agree more. Rohini mentioned Kaveri, and a cousin of mine, S. Gohan, was involved in Kaveri. They came out with a beautiful monograph as a result of that, this interaction between farmers of both states. A beautiful monograph where they said, simply, instead of talking about, quantity of water, let's talk about a percentage sharing formula. I mean, so elemental, saying we'll share distress. And these were the farmers in both states who thought of this. So why doesn't it gain more spin? I think it doesn't gain more spin because we have not activated the voice of the commons. If we activate the voice of the commons and we say, this is what people want across the board, this is what people want, that you should settle it harmoniously. And if you bring pressure that way, then I think all governments react to pressure.
Yeah.
Politicians react to pressure. If they see mounting public opinion, they dare not go against it. So I think that's our job, and this is exactly what we're talking about today. You're building societal muscle, creating that push, that, the harmonizing voice of the commons, to give it power, to give it, to give it voice and give it power.
Perfect.
I can just add, John, see, if you take it to the common man, they don't want their neighbor to perish on account of drought.
Yeah.
They will understand, because for them, they're all farmers. So
exactly.
They know the pathos of a real farmer, who are not able to cultivate because or cultivation goes bad on account of a lack of water. That's one thing. And secondly, I need to take a little forward as far as constitutional court's roles are concerned. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Sriram that no government officer will be in a position to concede for anything. 100% you're right. But if there is if you analyze Section 89 very, very sharply, there is something called judge-involved judicial settlement,
right,
which is hardly tested in courts now.
Yeah.
I used to test it very profusely. If you get you will know what's exactly the problem. And then finally, a well-meaning officer will say, let it come as an order of the court. I have hundreds of examples like that.
Yes.
I cannot concede because it will come upon me. Let it come as an order of the court.
Order of the court.
But then it's easy for the court, because court gets a double assurance that one, justice is done, two, it is not in violation of law, third, there is equity.
Right.
That's wonderful. This is the fruit of judge-involved discussion or dialogue or mediation or settlement or conciliation, whatever name we call it. It needs a collaborative process in court. And third thing I just wanted to add, we had a set up high dreams on one particular legislation maybe 10 years back. It is Gram Nyaya Act.
Yeah.
What was the whole purpose of Gram Nyaya Act? It was actually taking court to the gram, to the village, to have the people to get the sense of touching justice, experiencing justice in a very informal, but getting it constitutionally done. This was the whole purpose of Gram Nyaya Act. But unfortunately, all those Gram Nyayas got themselves converted into either a magistrate court or a municipal court in all the states. From my experience, I did not find a real Gram Nyaya Act functioning in the concept for which it was conceptualized and for which it was implemented. So if you want to reread and rework the whole legislative intent behind this Gram Nyaya Act, I'm quite sure, just as we said about the village panchayat or Gram Panchayat, miracles can work in those angles also, because it conceives the involvement of the elected people also in trying to resolve the disputes in a panchayat. That's the whole difference. But it's hardly experimented, it's hardly tested, it's hardly done. That's the whole problem. It all needs an initiative from the part of the. I'm saying mea culpa, it's our fault. In a sense, it needs an initiative from the court, no doubt about it. I saw a very valid question. I'll take only just half a minute more. I saw a very valid question from the chat box. Politicians are not the problem, lawyers are the problem. I do. Let me bluntly address that concern. Yes, there are a lot of anxiety or a lot of reservation for the lawyers for mediator settlement because it affects them professionally. So what I used to do when I refer a case for mediation is that, I tell the parties, you need to pay more fees in case the matter gets settled, because you are avoiding further litigation. You are getting peace in your hearts, in your society, you can sleep peacefully. Not because the fee that you pay to the lawyer is not for arguing the case and winning the case, but it is for facilitating a settlement in a case, and for it's a more difficult task, and you need to pay more fee for the lawyer. So if this culture of professional assistance for facilitating a settlement is also a professional service, and is not something less less dignified, and it needs to be professionally addressed and satisfied, then a lot of changes will come. So it needs a mindset change in the mindset of the litigant public. It needs a mindset in the litigating lawyers, and of course the courts.
Wow, thank you. this is such a fascinating discussion. And I think what I'm taking away from this is that not only do we have a need and a passion for bringing these sort of resolutions into place, but there are so many structural, both impediments and opportunities, and so many different sectors that we can work with to achieve these goals. And eye on the clock, I know we're going to be running out of time very soon, and I would like to give the audience their chance as well, and not enjoy having you all to myself. But before I come back to you for, or can we just take a closing thought from each of you, please? And almost, if I may, what do you think is the next important step that we should take? The one thing we should do to get this going, to get this moving further?
Yeah, because you had more trust on this community. We need to develop a culture of a community mediation, both intra-community and inter-community. This country is facing a lot of problems because there is any fruitful dialogue intra-community and inter-community. So if you take the statistics about the intra-community dispute pending in courts, where their religion or their holy books tell them don't go to the courts, you settle by give and take, and reconciliation. Peace and reconciliation is your motto. These are those people who have more faith in courts now. They are in courts for settling their intra-community disputes also. And this inter-community disputes is something very volatile in the Indian situation, because people are highly religious and less spiritual. This is the whole problem. So we need to develop an inter-community dialogue culture, and that is we need to have common platforms. Therefore, even if there is a small problems here at the grassroots level also, if there is a platform of the community leaders coming together, just as Panju said in Ayodhya, at least they saw eye to eye, and they were able to speak to each other just to understand their concerns. Likewise, we need to have intra-community mediation and inter-community mediation. This is the need of the hour, according to me.
Thank you, Justice Joseph. Mr. Panchu?
You've got a solid topic and so little time.
That's true.
But before I come to my thoughts, I just want to say that Joseph Saab, if you will please work on this idea of judicial settlement, and if we can evolve a way of taking it forward, and expand that concept, I think it will be fantastic. And I think, yes, lawyers should be paid, incentivized to come and settle in mediation, and we should find a way to structure that. But to come back to the main topic here, I'll break up my last point into 3 segments. I think one, we need to focus on the importance of dialogue, and I'm focusing on public disputes. The importance of dialogue, because it lessens tensions, it changes perspectives, and it gets people, both sides, engaged in the task of finding solutions rather than hammering away at each other. So I think this is what we're trying to work on. We've started a center for moderating dialogue. And the focus of that is public disputes. How do you take significant public disputes and find ways of this dialogue through talks, through lectures, through writings, through sponsored studies, through monographs, through TV programs, and to actually giving participants a top-level panel of possible mediators for them to engage with. Okay, that is what we're engaged with now, and this goes back to creating, as I said, that power of the middle. Giving a voice to that majority, that silent majority, and giving that majority a voice, and anchoring it, I would say, in constitutional values. And this I find, something which I think is important to repeat. I think this country is blessed because it has a constitution, a wonderful constitution. And if we can imbibe those values and bring them to the forefront, we all have private religions. That's for our homes and hearts and our houses. But we have only one public religion, and that's the Constitution. So in our public space, that's the religion. And if we can anchor to the spirit of that, then the Constitution its values are protections, it's a sword. And, and we will stay well as one country. We will stay well and we will function well. And I think that's another message we need to spread. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Nilekani, your thoughts, please, on next steps.
Thank you very much. On the question of the elephant in the room about the lawyers being part of the problem, I must say a person I'm deeply inspired by, though I didn't meet him, is my grandfather. He was a lawyer, and he used to always make the party settle long before his fees came into question. And I don't think my grandmother was particularly enamored of this approach to his profession, because she said, how am I supposed to feed my extended family if you keep... So how can we find a way, as just as both of them said actually, how do people who help settle disputes early on also have a remuneration, which is because you're actually achieving the real purpose of justice. It should not be that lawyers should fear this because they're being robbed of their professional life. So we as a society have to come to some kind of understanding about that. And of course, I'm not a lawyer or anything. So from my point of view as a layperson, I can only say, I think all of us should do something to carry forward there seems to be an intent for conflict resolution between communities, between corporations, between the states, between all aspects of society. If we have the intent is not enough. We now need to sharpen the grammar and language of that intent so that we actually have a toolkit with which to practice that intent on. And that's what the idea of uncommon ground is. How can we allow children to do role playing? And how can we get them to be in situations where they understand the highest purpose, the highest justice that they can achieve, etc., etc. And that requires all of society. It's a societal mission, right? The less conflict there is in society, all of us succeed. So how can we all participate in this prevention, reduction, a new public culture, especially in the areas of, for example, I find RWAs to be a ripe place to begin this kind of curriculum building and public culture building. They're beginning to do that. We saw a bit of that in the pandemic. So that's a wonderful place to start because these are new institutions, right? Relatively, I think that's a good place to start. And wherever there are common pool resources, right? Where everybody benefits from everybody else behaving right in terms of using or extraction. I think these are two ripe places for all of society to start beginning. But the earlier, the better. We should start in pre-kindergarten or something with some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was riveting. Tara, can we have you with us, please? I know there are many audience questions.
Yes,
before we get to the audience question, may I quickly just tell Rohini, it's not difficult to, incentivize lawyers to settle in mediations. All we need to accept is the concept of a settlement fee where a lawyer assists the client in mediation, and to say that can be irrespective of number. That's all you need to do. Finished.
Yeah, lovely. But and the fascinating part of this discussion has been how our audience too has been thinking about this from so many different angles. Of course, there's the legal system, the justice system, but also from the societal level, some fascinating questions and points that are being raised in terms of, in order to build that individual muscle, we have to find a way to build the institutional muscle. And Ameya has asked a question, what is the role of the media today in building this concept of uncommon ground? How do we have role models on TV, on radio, on film, speaking about dialogue and understanding? How does that culture go into the public media aspect of it? Or Ekta, who has raised the point, Rohini, that you just raised and we have discussed many times before, is getting the idea of dialogue and collaboration into the minds of young children. How do we build a curricula for kindergarten kids to start thinking about collaborative processes? Imagine a world where a grade 1 and grade 3 kids who get into an argument know that there is that space under the tree where they can engage in a dialogue to figure out what the problem is. Just imagine the muscle that we're going to be able to create if our children start thinking this way. So that was the point that Ekta raised. And I think uniformly, the idea of these processes being part of the first option, whether it's government disputes, whether it is commercial disputes, personal disputes, that culture of mediation first as a rule, especially for government cases, is a point that Anthony has raised. So again, I know we're running out of time. We've hit the 1 hour mark. You're so right, Mr. Panchu. This is not a session for 1 hour. It has to go on for many, many more. But what we will do is have repeated sessions, because we are all in a space of being a little bit Zoom tired. And so that's why we had to keep this down to a 1 hour session. But the fact is, we have an appetite, a desire, and a need to engage in these conversations and these concepts. Thank you for being with us today, everybody. Thank you to our panelists for opening our minds. This is the start of the project. As you can see, the space of mediation is expanding well beyond legal disputes. We are looking as a community to see how this can become part of our social culture. So it is something that each one of us has to engage in. It's not just the lawyers and the judges, but each individual person has to engage in to build that muscle. So let's change this and work together in building that muscle. Whatever questions we have not answered, we should attempt to answer by an email. We're part of a series. We have our next series coming up in 2 weeks. This is going to be on the nuances of private mediation. A very important point, Rohini, that you raised is how do we incentivize, how do we professionalize this service? How can mediators and lawyers find a lucrative profession in this, where they get paid for their service in this? And that's where the whole world of private mediation needs to develop, because that's how we get good mediators out and out into our community. So our next session is hearing from mediators across the world. We have someone from Singapore, from Europe, and from America, along with Laila, speaking about the nuts and bolts of building a private mediation culture. So do join us for that session. It's on the 20th of November at 7:30 p.m. Thank you all once again for being part of this discussion. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Mr. Panchu, Rohini, and Justice Joseph. This was a wonderful way to spend an hour. And thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.